Greetings, JobStream family. This is Adonis McReynolds here. This is Jeff Seitz, my co-founder. And I think the topic that we're going to be speaking of today is definitely going to be geared towards those who are looking to build their business and build it fast. Today is kind of a scary time to be building a business, if we're being real. Lots and lots of risk associated with hiring people, especially new people that maybe you've never vetted before. Recruiting has become absolutely essential, and it always has been, but now you really can't afford to mess up and get things wrong. Jess, what do you think is probably the biggest fear that people have when it comes to recruiting?
Yeah, I think the biggest fear is either that they're going to obviously get the wrong fit for the company, that they're going to spend all this money on a recruiter, and then the person that comes into the job is either not going to be good at their job, or they're going to leave really quickly and they'll have to re-recruit again. So it's just a big waste of time and money and training that person.
Yeah, that's 100% right. That is a huge fear that people have. And so the question ultimately resonates on, how do I do this and how do I do it well? Well, for starters, I want to really kind of begin to differentiate and start to talk about the effects of using external agencies over internal recruiting teams. This is kind of a shift that a lot of companies have made to save money, which I completely understand that. You want to go and you want to find cheaper labor to go and help you fill a number of different roles for your company, and you're hoping, crossing your fingers, not to have to pay as much. If you do end up having to replace somebody, obviously that ends up being extra money. But if all things go according to plan, you should, quote unquote, be spending less money than if you're using an external agency. But there's a few reasons why I want to highlight external agencies as actually the right decision to make as you get ready to build your business. The first reason that I want to highlight that is a huge difference between working with an external agency and working with an internal team is that the external recruiter is usually going to have a lot more of a neutral point of view from the perspective of the people you're trying to hire. People that work for you, they're going to be naturally geared to try and speak always as pleasantly as possible about your company and never really say anything that's negative, which in turn leads to a lack of trust on the candidate side, right? It's a little bit harder to get them to buy in to what you're selling and what you're hiring for. With an internal recruiting team, that's job is to try and go out and find people for your team exclusively, right? Like there's nothing else that they can do. They have to fill jobs for you if you're a business owner, and that's it. Their loyalty is to you and you alone. The problem with this can be, from the candidate's perspective, is that there's a heavy bias towards whether or not the role is going to be a fit for them. And they prefer a more neutral point of view. They prefer a company that's a third party to come in and tell them hey, I have no allegiance to this company in terms of needing to get paid by them. I'm not making a check, a daily check from them. But I have spoken with the executives. I have spoken with the team. And I can tell you that this is a good opportunity for you based off of what I've experienced. And so that's a little bit more believable from an external agency than it is from an internal agency or an internal recruiter. That's just the facts of the matter. The second thing regarding that is, you're going to have candidates being a lot more transparent with a third party, right? So when you're talking with a recruiter from an internally, you're going to treat that recruiter very seriously, super seriously, and never really speak your mind, because you know that if you say something that's even slightly off, that recruiter is directly tied to the employer. So there's an advantage in being able to have a third party that's not directly tied to your company, because then they'll be able to speak more accurately to how the candidate is when the cat is gone, right? The phrase is the cat leaves and the mice come out to play. Well, the external recruiter usually gets a lot more of an accurate view of the said candidate, because they're not directly attached to your business, right? And that's important today. There's a lot of people who understand, if you're dealing with an internal recruiter, you're minding your P's and Q's and you're going to be your best self at all times. With an external recruiter, they can objectively tell you, hey, I spoke with this person and this is how this person is. with somebody that's not even working with your company. So this is how I think that they'll be once they're working with you. It gives you a much clearer picture, makes you a little bit more confident in the character and the professionalism of the person, because you're dealing with somebody that has gone through somebody outside of your firm. And that's important in terms of establishing the validity of a person's character. The second point I want to make is the creativity and flexibility of external recruiters. External recruiters like myself will work night and day looking for roles, right? We're not being paid hourly, right? You're not paying us hourly. So the idea is we got to try to fill this role fast if we want to, have a chance at actually making this placement happen, right? If we really want to collect the entirety of the fee that an external recruiter should collect. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next point. But creativity and flexibility, a lot of internal recruiters, they're limited in terms of what they can do from a networking perspective. There's certain, tampering laws that they have to be aware of. They can't necessarily really specialize at going to your competitors and pulling some of their best talent away, right? If somebody from a competitive company comes and talks to a candidate who's killing it at their current job, they're going to be like, no, sorry, you're a competitor. I'm obviously not going to trust you, right? But if an external recruiter goes to that person and says, hey, this is a competitor that's doing really well, now you have a little bit more buy-in. It kind of goes to the previous point of there's going to be a little bit of more of a neutrality, a transparency there, where an external party goes to the talent that you actually want. They tell them, hey, this is what's going on at this company, and boom, now you have something pretty special brewing there, because you could potentially steal the other team's greatest players. And I'll move quickly to the third point, because I think that this is extremely relevant. Internal recruiters are motivated by what? Stability, right? The agency world has no stability. Let's just be real. Like for me, my next check is going to come from placements, right? And from what I'm doing on the business side. Now, granted, I do have other, ventures and things that I do that in today's world, if everything is just based on one practice, you're in a pretty exposed position. But for the most part, predominantly, most of my revenue is going to come from recruiting and placing people. So if I'm not doing that and doing it well, that's going to, reflect, and it's I'm not going to be able to feed my family. I'm not going to be able to provide for those around me. And so that's a big deal. Like if I'm making a stable check somewhere, I don't really have to be creative quick. I don't have to necessarily fill that role super, super fast. I can kind of take my sweet time, because it's like, hey, I mean, even if you set a deadline on your internal recruiters, they're still probably not going to be as fast and as well equipped as an external recruiter, because an external recruiter is always competing against themselves. They're competing against other teams. They're competing against people even in your company that are trying to fill that role faster than them. So they're always on their toes. Nobody has to tell them you got to fill this quick. They're in their mind, they're thinking they've got to fill it quick and they've got to do it well so they can get repeat business, right? There's less at stake for the internal recruiter, which is why they're there, to be honest, right? Most internal recruiters have had experiences at agencies before and did not like the pressure. They did not like the feeling of being put under the gun and hey, you got to do this quick, you got to do it efficiently. Now it's okay, we can go under the safety and umbrella and stability of a company that's going to pay them a base salary. So now they can just run ads and just, look at people on there. And I know this may be a caricature of some of the internal recruiters out there. I'm not saying all internal recruiters out there are lazy, slow, not motivated by speed. But predominantly speaking, the agency recruiter is the best choice for your business if you're building one, because they're going to be able to have a wider range of options in terms of talent that they can recruit for. And in our specific case, which I will wrap up this video by saying, it's actually less expensive to use my recruiting agency than to pay a internal recruiter. And you might be saying, what? How in the world is that possible? Well, see, the thing is we are big on trying to establish a safety net with our clients. We believe that our clients are in a very vulnerable stage. Most of them are somewhere in between 50 and 500 in terms of their employee count. And we understand that there's only so much money to go around and pay everybody. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to not only condense our pricing so that way it's affordable and reasonable for companies to use again and again and again, But we also have great guarantees attached, as well as different services that we can provide the company in case the company really wants to start from scratch holistically with growing their revenue first and then moving on towards staffing. So we're not necessarily a company that only focuses on the recruiting side. We're going to focus on other aspects of your business as well and make sure that you're fine-tuned, so that way when we do reach out to competitive companies, at least the candidates that are working there, they're looking at something that's pretty exciting. So it's a little bit of our logic there in terms of why it would be a good idea to go the external route rather than relying on an internal team. If you use us, you really don't need an internal team. You could choose to keep them if you wanted to, just to have some extra hands on deck. But the truth is, you're not going to spend more than 20 grand for any level of candidate or service that we offer. Okay. It's very, very simple. We keep things cheap. We keep things quick. We do things efficiently, and we want to make sure that we're doing as much for your company as we possibly can, so that your startup has the best chance of succeeding, or if you run a mid-sized business, the best chance of sustaining, right? So here's to your success. We are more than halfway through the year. We hope that you come and visit us at jobstreamai.com. and that you'll give us a call as well. We have our contact info. You can jump on one of our calendars from the website. And if you have any questions, which most likely you probably do, you can direct message either one of us. This is Jess Seitz. This is me, Adonis McReynolds, and we're signing off. See you on the other side.
See you next time.